A few weeks ago, a plea deal for Hunter Biden absolutely fell apart. This had to do with the case involving his tax evasion and illegal gun purchase. He apparently purchased a gun when he was using crack cocaine, which is against the law. Lying about it on federal documents is also clearly against the law. So new reporting by Politico, and I gotta say, it's an excellent report, really helps to shed light about how those plea deals came to be, why they fell apart, and what kinds of conversations and deal making was happening behind the scenes between the prosecutors and the defense attorneys representing Hunter Biden. Now, first, let's talk a little bit about what Politico did here. They managed to get access to about 300 pages of email and documents that were exchanged between Hunter Biden's defense team and the federal prosecutors. And in those documents, we learned quite a bit, okay? So Biden's defense team apparently urged federal prosecutors in October of 2022 to avoid charging Hunter Biden with the gun charge. They argued that charging Hunter Biden with the gun charge would be giving into political pressure by the right wing, and that it would have all sorts of negative impacts on the DOJ, the public's perception of the DOJ. I'm not really sure I'm buying that argument, but nonetheless, Biden's lawyer, Chris Clark, wasn't amused that the potential gun charges were leaked. And then he also felt that it was politically motivated and could violate the Second Amendment. Clark was also worried that this would mean that President Joe Biden could potentially testify if the charge went to trial. So according to Betsy Woodruff Swan over at Politico, who did a good job with this report, Clark wrote, the federal statute barring drug users from possessing guns is constitutionally dubious at best. He cited the recent Supreme Court ruling on the Second Amendment, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, Inc. v. Bruen, which held that all gun restrictions had to be similar to those that existed at America's founding. And look, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's obviously relevant to this case. None of those laws barred people from owning guns because of drug problems. So it was just a matter of time until the Supreme Court overturned the prohibition that Biden had allegedly violated, Clark argued. Since the Bruen ruling, numerous criminal defendants have made the same argument in court, some with success. So really this piece starts off with the defense attorney, in this case, Chris Clark, reaching out to the federal prosecutors to discourage them from tacking on this additional gun charge. And then in this 32-page letter that he wrote to prosecutors, Clark said the following: President Biden now unquestionably would be a fact witness for the defense in any criminal trial. Now, considering the fact that this is, in my opinion, being blown up for political reasons by the right, I don't know, Cenk, I feel like what Clark said there provides more of an incentive for the federal prosecutors, which, by the way, one of the federal prosecutors was chosen by Donald Trump, right? It's almost like they're threatening the right wing with a good time. Like, no, please don't add this gun charge, because if you do, there is some likelihood that President Joe Biden in this politicized investigation would have to, be a witness, a fact witness in the case. What are your thoughts, Cenk?
Yeah, so the fact that David Weiss, really the only prosecutor that matters here now, because he's the special counsel, was appointed by Donald Trump, is going to be very, very relevant in a little bit. But let me break it down first. So look, this case is definitely outrageous. The only question is, we don't know which way we should be outraged. So it's either massively undercharging or massively overcharging. So why? The gun charge and the tax charge, for reasons that I can explain in a minute, are ridiculous. Total horse crap.
Disagree.
Yeah, all right, we'll debate it. We'll talk her through, okay? So that leaves you two possible reasons, in my opinion, why they're doing that. Either they don't want to charge the lobbying stuff because it's real, like violations of lobbying, etc., that Hunter Biden did. That's the mother lode, right? Did he actually affect policy of the United States of America? Did he affect his dad? etc. Either they have a lot there and they're trying to distract you by just charging these nonsense gun and tax charges, give them complete immunity and let them walk, in which case it's massively undercharging and it's an outrage and Republicans are right, okay? Or they've got nothing on the lobbying. And so in order to save face, this Trump prosecutor is like, all right, let's charge him with nonsense so that it looks like we were tough on him. And in which case they're overcharging and almost definitely going to lose in court, in my opinion.
Okay, so look, for me, what I did with this case is I considered how I would feel if the shoe were on the other foot, right? If this was a case involving Donald Trump, he failed to pay his taxes, he purchased a gun while addicted to crack cocaine. These are all like, there are laws, and these laws were allegedly broken, right? I would want Trump to be treated the same as anyone else in our criminal justice system, right? If you don't pay your taxes, if you're buying a gun illegally, you're gonna face some criminal charges and no one's gonna look out for you and try to get you a break. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, go ahead.
I can explain. So look, there's the gun charge and tax charge is obviously different. So the gun charge is, would I have prosecuted Trump on the gun charge? No way, not even close. It would be massively counterproductive. It'd be a terrible idea, and it would just flat out be unjust. So why do I say that? Literally no one has been charged with this crime in the state of Delaware as Hunter Biden has. So usually a gun charge like this does get charged when there's an underlying crime. So let's say that he robbed a bank and then he had a gun on him, which he legally could have had except for the fact that he was on drugs. And because of the drugs, then it becomes an illegal gun possession. And you add that on top of the bank robbery, the armed bank robbery, and all the conspiracy and all that stuff. When there is no underlying crime, literally no one in the state of Delaware has ever been charged with this crime. So on that alone, it's just garbage, garbage. Second of all, Republicans, be careful what you wish for. I mean, look, I like gun charges. I would press a lot more gun charges in rational fact patterns where there's an actual crime, right? You sure you want that? Because if this sets a precedent, I guarantee you at least a quarter of the Republicans in this country have violated this law. In states where marijuana is illegal, none of you ever smoked marijuana and had a gun at the same time, let alone the other drugs. No, utter horse crap. I can get into the taxes next if you want.
No, okay, so look, that's how you feel about the gun charges. I'm willing to let that go. I think the tax charges are much more important. But what I really want to talk about is the plea agreement, because the way the plea agreement was reported prior to this Politico piece, which is very well detailed, I couldn't really understand why it fell apart and why Republicans were furious with Weiss, the special counsel, for agreeing to the plea deal, and really what the various iterations of the plea deal were and why the judge had such a huge problem with it, right? So I'm gonna go through the 3 iterations of the plea deal so you understand what happened. And the reason why the plea deal bothers me is because it would have provided immunity for Biden should there have been some evidence. Like, let's say he agreed to the plea deal goes through. If after the fact, there is evidence to show that Hunter Biden had committed other crimes, including lobbying related crimes, if he was selling influence to foreign business partners, under the plea deal, he wouldn't get prosecuted for that, okay? So let me go through the iterations real quick. Because just really, really interesting how this all played out. So on May 18th of 2022, another lawyer for Biden sent 2 Delaware prosecutors, including a woman by the name of Leslie Wolf. It's a senior prosecutor in the Delaware US Attorney's Office, the first draft of a proposed deal structured so it wouldn't need a judge sign off and would not require a guilty plea from Biden. So Biden, I'm sorry, it would require a guilty plea from Biden, right? So Biden would admit that he was late filing his taxes for 2017 and 2018, and that he owned a gun while he was using drugs. He would promise to pay any taxes he still owed, and that he would never own a gun again. This was the initial plea deal, right? If he upheld his end of the bargain through January of 2025, the Justice Department would promise to not prosecute him for anything they investigated thus far. And the draft wording of that promise was pretty clear and broad. So I'm gonna read you the Justice Department draft. It read as follows. The Department of Justice agrees not to criminally prosecute Robert Hunter Biden and the affiliated businesses, and then it lists the businesses' names, for any federal crimes arising from the conduct generally described in the attached statement of facts, or for any other federal crimes relating to matters investigated by the United States. Now, one of the things they're investigating him for is crimes committed having to do with lobbying, right? And selling influence to foreign business partners. Now, Weiss's team apparently was pleased with this initial plea agreement, which would require him to plead guilty to both charges. And they'd want the deal to be structured as a pretrial diversion agreement, which meant it could come with a built-in promise to drop all charges against Biden, again, if he abided by its terms for several years. But then all of a sudden, you have the second iteration, because on May 19th, Wolf, this is the prosecutor, pointed to another deal that Biden's could be modeled on. An agreement the Delaware US Attorney's Office had made with camera company Aegis Electronic Group in 2011 to resolve allegations that it violated sanctions on Iran. Now, the company didn't plead guilty to anything in that case, and the Justice Department eventually withdrew charges. As part of that agreement, which David Weiss had green-lighted, Aegis had to cooperate with the Fed's ongoing investigation. But Biden's deal, Wolf wrote, wouldn't need similar cooperation requirements. That evening, one of Biden's lawyers sent another draft pretrial diversion agreement addressing both the gun and tax issues. It was still quite similar to the first. It also incorporated Wolf's must-haves, and it guaranteed Biden the same broad protection from prosecution for anything the Justice Department had investigated up to that point. It also guaranteed that the department would move to dismiss all charges if Biden upheld his end of the deal. So the only difference between the first iteration and the second iteration is in the second iteration, he doesn't have to plead guilty to anything. Then you get these IRS whistleblowers who came out and they say, something's fishy with this investigation. They're slow walking it. Biden's getting special treatment. Prosecutors get freaked out over that. And so they decide, no, we need the third iteration of this plea deal. So they go back to deal making, right? And on the third try, they decide and they agree that he will plead guilty to the tax charges, but not guilty on the gun charge. And that the gun charge, as long as Biden abides by his end of the deal, will eventually get dropped, right? As long as he abides by the rules and doesn't, break any of the specific rules that are set forth in this plea deal. Now, in all three examples, what really stands out to me is the fact that had the plea deals gone through, Hunter Biden would basically have blanket immunity when it comes to what I would argue is the most serious potential crime, which is the selling influence to foreign business partners, right?
Yeah, that's right, Anna. But that's why this case is an outrage either way, because if this is not addressed by anyone, and it's driving me crazy. And David Weiss has never said a goddamn word about it, and it's actually infuriating that the Republicans are not focusing on this, because if it turns out that David Weiss has a ton of evidence that Hunter Biden did things that were wrong in lobbying and getting those sweetheart deals, etc., that's the thing that Republicans were supposed to be mad about. Not some stupid gun charges or irrelevant tax charges. And if it turns out they're using these minor charges to let him skate on the major charges, well, then that's not a little corrupt. That's massively corrupt, okay? So in which case, David Weiss should be in massive trouble, and this is a serious scandal. Okay, but David Weiss is appointed by Donald Trump, so I don't know why he would do that.
Okay, so let me jump in, because So I covered this story when the plea deal fell apart. It was on a Wednesday. I covered it on a solo show. You weren't there. Republicans were freaking out about the plea agreement, and they soured on Weiss as a result of the plea agreement because they want to get. Yeah, go ahead.
But Ana, they're freaking out because they think, I mean, as far as I saw, and so if you saw, and I wasn't on the show that day, didn't follow the news as closely, but they're freaking out because they're like, no, prosecute him harder on these charges. These charges are irrelevant. Are you going to prosecute him on the actual thing, or are you not going to prosecute him on the actual thing?
They had a problem with the sweetheart deal, which would offer Biden immunity when it comes to other potential crimes that he committed.
No, of course they did. No, I know that, Ana. Of course they did. But has anyone shown one piece of evidence that Hunter Biden broke the law in that regard? Like, if they have the evidence, this is the time to show it, right? Because then I will join their side and say this is an outrage, and I can't believe they're covering this up. And this is exactly how you would cover it up. You'd prosecute him on minor, stupid charges no one cares about, while giving him an immunity deal on the more important charges. But if you don't have any evidence of the serious charges, and just because you want to satiate Trump and the Republicans, you're prosecuting this guy on charges that no one else in America would get charged for, then that's an outrage in the opposite direction. There is no situation here where there isn't an outrage. Either Hunter Biden is getting totally railroaded on these nonsense charges, or he did something much worse and David Weiss somehow flipped teams, is Biden deep state, and is trying to cover up for him. I'm not ruling that possibility out because we haven't seen any of the evidence. And by the way, the guy makes like Hunter Biden in 2017, 2018. Now remember, his dad's long out of office. No one has any idea that Biden is going to win in 2020. In 2017 and 2018, Hunter made $1.5 million in both those years. Where the hell is this guy getting this money? So I'm totally open to the fact that he's a crook, but you have to show it. And so far, David Weiss has shown no such evidence, and neither of the Republicans.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. So we're actually on the same page. I haven't seen any evidence of any other criminality or potential criminality from Weiss's investigation. The Republicans in Congress and their investigation has been a complete and utter joke. I mean, we've seen just Devin Archer's testimony was supposed to be a bombshell, both implicating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and nothing of the sort happened during his interview. In fact, Representative James Comer didn't even attend the testimony that day or the interview that day. And so, the House Oversight Committee has really, fumbled on this. I haven't seen anything from the special prosecutor in regard to other potential criminality. So you're right, Cenk, we don't know for sure. But I have to say, I do have a problem with this blanket immunity. I do think that goes too far, right? Because the investigation is ongoing, and just clearing him of, giving him immunity and protecting him in case something does come out, I think is a little questionable.
No, Ana, there's a reason for that. So either the reason is because they want to cover up his other crimes, or it's because the charges are so weak that you have to offer something in return to get Hunter Biden to accept a plea deal. Otherwise, if I was him, I'd go to court and I'd humiliate the prosecutors. These are charges that should definitely not be brought. Like the tax charges, as soon as they said you owe these taxes, he said, I'm sorry, I was high those years, which everyone knows is true. And he immediately paid the back taxes and the penalties. It is very different than the Trump fact pattern, where they have decades of cheating on taxes, writing one set of numbers to get loans, another set of numbers for the IRS, two sets of books, and then when caught, they fight it tooth and nail, 200%, etc. So when you got real tax cheats like that, and it has had a material effect, that's when you file charges on past tax evasion like this. Right. But when an accountant or a dentist doesn't pay his taxes for 1 or 2 years, and then when they say paid, he immediately pays it, including with penalties, that crime is charged 0% of the time.
Okay, final thing I'll say, on the day that the plea deal fell apart, right? There was a misunderstanding of some sort between the prosecutors and the defense team, because the prosecutors made it appear as though the plea deal, did not offer the immunity that Hunter Biden was looking for. And as a result, Clark fired back and said, well, then we have no deal. The language in the agreement is much more muscular than what the prosecutor is saying now. So the judge asked just how much protection Biden would receive from possible future charges. And Leo Weiss, the lead prosecutor representing the government that day in court, said the protection was narrow, limited to tax charges for the years 2017 and 2018. By the way, the documents do not indicate that. The documents made it clear that the immunity was much broader than that, not narrow and not limited to the tax charges and to gun charges linked to the specific pistol he bought. Wise added that under the terms of the deal, the Justice Department could still hypothetically prosecute Biden for illegal lobbying. So at that point, Hunter Biden's lawyer, Clark, freaked out and basically said, no, our agreement had language that was much more muscular than that. And so if this is what the plea deal is, we do not have an agreement. And so everything fell apart on the day that Hunter Biden was supposed to enter the not guilty plea. And so since it fell apart, he ended up pleading not guilty to both charges, the tax charges and the gun charge. And it appears, as things stand right now, that this case is gonna go to trial.
Yeah, all right, last things here. That lack of clarity that you're talking about is egregious. The judge did a great job here. The one person that clearly did a great job. Remember, we're telling you that the judge who said, no, this deal should not go forward in the Hunter Biden case did a fantastic job. Okay, so now the reason she did a great job is because what the hell does the immunity deal mean? If it means just the guns and the tax charges, then it's useless. And Hunter Biden would never take the deal. He would say, if I was him, I'd say, I'll see you in court. The whole point of this deal is that I get immunity on everything, right? That happened in the past. But if it includes immunity on everything that happened in the past and the prosecutors didn't agree to that and they're not even sure, no, that's super weird and totally unacceptable. It has to be very, very clear. What is the immunity for? Otherwise, this deal is nonsense. And that's what the judge sniffed out. And I love that she did that. And finally, what's the charge? Like on the stuff that we're actually concerned about, him selling us out to foreign countries, et cetera, so he can get paid. What does illegal lobbying mean? I've literally never heard, and I might have missed it from the Republicans. I mean, they've done 2,000 hearings on this, right? But what specific laws are they claiming Hunter Biden broke on illegal lobbying? Because the most common one that people break is they don't register as a foreign agent. But in this case, he was on the board of the Ukrainian gas company. He wasn't hiding anything. So where's the beef? Show me what the charge is and what your evidence is. So until then, this is just to make Republicans happy. And I think it's actually a bad idea to give it to David Weiss. Trump picked David Weiss out of 9 district attorneys to say he's definitely one of the ones that I trust in making America safe again. So he's a hardcore Trump guy. And so I don't know why in the world he would go and try to protect Hunter Biden. And if it's just the normal fact pattern and he's trying to make sure that they get Hunter Biden to help Donald Trump because he's on Trump's side, well, that's prosecutorial misconduct and that's terrible. Because I'm telling you, nobody else gets charged on this stuff. The things he actually charged are nonsense.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.